Chivalry of a Failed Knight begins with a news broadcast about Stella making it into the Hagun Academy in Tokyo with the highest score in history. She is touted as the most talented and strongest knight. Today was Stella's first day of entering the Hagun Academy. She was specially picked up by a woman who turned out to be the academy's principal. On the other side was a man named Ikki Kurogane who was practicing swordsmanship on the academy grounds. He practiced seriously every day because, since childhood, everyone considered him the weakest person. He has neither magic nor the ability to wield a sword, even though this is the era of humans and blazers' abilities, where everyone can summon the spirit of weapons, swords, or magic of varying degrees. But behind his weakness, Ikki is determined to become the strongest blazer knight of all time. After finishing training, Ikki returned to his dorm room, but he felt surprised because there was a woman in his room who only wore underwear. So, to make it even, he instead took off his clothes, and Stella thought he was a pervert. Stella then complained to the principal. Then the principal told Ikki to apologize to Stella for this misunderstanding. When Ikki accidentally talked about underwear again, Stella immediately got angry, but she recovered after Ikki said that Stella's body was very beautiful. Then they argued about the room because Ikki initially felt it was his room. Not long after that, the principal came there and said that Stella and Ikki were placed in the same room. The principal explained that the two of them were placed in one room because Ikki was a Class F or worse student while Stella was a Class A student who was the highest level gifted student. They also argue again about the room rules that should not be done. Stella asked Ikki not to see or talk to her and other rules, but Ikki wanted to make rules too. Finally, the principal asked them to have a sword fight. The winner was the one who could make the rules. Ikki agreed and was not afraid to fight Stella, a rank A student, because the strong didn't always win in any battle. Stella also said the winner would be the master while the loser would be the servant. They agreed until they finally went to the duel arena to fight. After the rules were read, the two of them immediately started fighting. Ikki released his flagship sword in Tetsu and Stella released the fire sword Lavatane, but Ikki was still able to withstand the fire sword's attack. The principal told the woman beside her that this battle was quite fierce. Even though Ikki was weak, his abilities almost matched Stella's. Stella had flung the sword many times, but Ikki only used defensive mode. But it was Ikki's tactic of observing the movement of Stella's sword, wherein he had the knack of imitating the enemy's movements. Then Ikki counterattacked Stella with the same sword move and called the blade steel technique. Then he managed to stick his sword on Stella's shoulder until she was surprised. Seeing this, Stella began to fight him seriously. Stella, who felt annoyed, immediately released the fire dragon magic sword. Even Ikki, who had been training hard all this time, didn't stay silent. He attacked Stella with a noble art move and managed to defeat her. As a result, Ikki was the winner. After the match, Stella was immediately treated at the school clinic, and the principal visited her. Stella said that Ikki was not a weak person because he could defeat her, but why was he placed at rank F and called worst one? The principal then explained that Ikki was a strong student in fighting and practiced hard, but he didn't have any magic power, so he didn't advance to class and didn't qualify for the Blazer class. She said that Ikki didn't give up even though the academy system prevented him from becoming a magic knight. Since then, Stella didn't take Ikki lightly even though he was at rank F. Stella also has to be sporty in accepting her defeat in front of Ikki and is willing to be a servant in their room. While Ikki was sleeping, Stella accidentally saw Ikki's back and stomach. This is the first time she has seen a male body. When Ikki was about to wake up, Stella was so shocked that she hit his head. Ikki then asked Stella to be his servant, but Stella asked for the agreement to be cancelled. Ikki said the princess of the Vermilion Kingdom would not break the Sword Knight's promise. Then he gently mentioned his first order to Stella to become his roommate. Since then, they began to get along and became friends. On the other side there was a beautiful woman named Shizuku. She is Ikki's younger sister and it's her first day at Hagun's Academy. At the same time, it was seen that Stella and Ikki were jogging on the school grounds to increase their physical strength. Ikki was happy because Stella wanted to accompany him to train even though she was already strong. Before Ikki continued training, he drank from his water bottle. Then he offered the bottle to Stella but she refused because it was like an indirect kiss. After being teased by Ikki, Stella then wanted to drink from the bottle. That morning, Ikki looked happy, so Stella asked why. Then he replied that today was his little sister's first day of school at this academy. When school hours started, a female teacher named Yuri-chan was explaining the lesson. Ikki and Stella were seen sitting next to each other. They listened to the teacher's explanation of the 7-Star Fighting Festival. Normally the school would send selected student representatives, but now it will be selected based on the selection battle starting next week. Stella then asked Yuri-chan how many matches each student would have. She replied that there were approximately 10 matches per person, assuming the students would compete at least once every 3 days. She also said that this year Ikki could participate in the selection process. When Yuri-chan said this excitedly, she suddenly fainted because she was actually sick. Then Yuri-chan was taken to the school clinic for treatment. In the clinic room, Stella and Ikki were seen accompanying Yuri. Ikki was happy because she was the first teacher to congratulate him on being able to take part in the selection this year. And after that, they left. When Ikki and Stella were walking toward the room, suddenly a woman hugged Ikki. Her name is Kagami, who is Ikki's classmate from the news club. She said that she's a fan of Ikki. After she saw his match yesterday, Kagami was interested in making news about Ikki and interviewing him. Stella, who felt jealous, immediately left them. Then Ikki tried to chase after Stella. While chasing Stella, suddenly Shizuku on the other side called out to Ikki. She immediately approached Ikki and hugged and kissed him. Seeing this, Stella felt even more jealous. But according to Shizuku, kissing is a sign of affection because they haven't seen each other in 4 years. Finally, Shizuku and Stella argued until they decided to fight until the school building was damaged. As a result, they were both summoned to the principal's office and sentenced to clean 27 toilets in the building. While serving their sentence, the two were still arguing and mocking each other. Shizuku said to Stella that she didn't know Ikki's real condition. He is never considered in his family, so he only has her. After cleaning the toilet, Shizuku went to her room, which turned out to be she also shared a room with a man named Nagi Arisuin. On the other hand, Stella was thinking about Shizuku's words. What does it mean that Ikki was never considered to exist? Stella, who was curious, immediately asked Ikki about it. Then Ikki was forced to tell Stella. The hero who led Japan to win the previous World War was named Ryoma Kurogane, who is Ikki's grandfather. He is also a role model for Ikki. Every generation, the Kurogane family has always produced talented blazers, but Ikki doesn't have that talent, so that his parents and siblings did not consider the existence of him. Ikki, who was tired of hearing all their talk, chose to leave the house. However, Ryoma found Ikki and brought him back home. His grandfather always motivates him because even though he is a weak person does not mean he can't be strong. Since then, Ikki wanted to be strong like his grandfather even though he had to train alone and no one taught him. Hearing Ikki's story, Stella remembered her childhood when she always practiced alone even though she was the daughter of a king. Ikki's story made Stella sympathize. From that moment, they were determined to be strong together even though they would compete. On the other hand, Shizuku seemed to be telling Nagi about her family. She tells of her older brother's past who was treated cruelly by her family, which made her hate them. She promised to do her best for her older brother. The next day, it appears that Stella and Ikki are training to improve their abilities. Stella had already got the fight schedule, and she was going to fight Momotani from 3rd grade. She seemed excited to join the festival as an event to show her strength and the way to fight against the strongest blazer later. Then the school bell rang. Stella intends to take Ikki out on Saturday and says that today is Friday, which means school holidays tomorrow. Soon Ikki got a message from Shizuku asking him to go shopping tomorrow on Saturday. Seeing Stella upset, Ikki then asked her to go shopping with Shizuku. The next day they went to a shopping center together in Tokyo. Shizuku also seemed to invite Nagi as her roommate. After walking for a while, they took a break at the cafe to order drinks and ice cream. There Stella and Shizuku were still scrambling to be beside Ikki. After that, Ikki and Nagi went to the toilet for a while. He then thanked Nagi for accompanying and caring for his little sister at school. Suddenly Nagi hears that armed criminals have come to look for the hostages and shoot them in the toilet. But the criminals couldn't find Ikki and Nagi because they both escaped with the help of the power of Nagi's dimensional space device. He is a shadow controller, so he can create a room that crosses a room. Ikki immediately called the principal, and he told that he and Nagi were currently hiding because there were criminals with guns in Tokyo who wanted to take them hostage. The principal also replied that she already knew because the incident had been included in breaking news. Ikki then asked her for permission to use their magic power and devices. All the cafe visitors were taken hostage there, including Stella and Shizuku. They looked like other hostages just standing there without fighting. But when the thugs kicked a small child and pointed a weapon, Stella immediately unleashed her magic. The thugs tried to shoot Stella, but the bullets didn't work on her. Then a man named Bisho appears who is the villain's leader and a blazer. He called Stella the second princess of the Vermilion Kingdom. Bisho immediately released his power, called the Judgment Ring, which could withstand Stella's power. As Stella attacked with the power of the Fire Dragon's magic sword, in an instant Bisho managed to block the attack and immobilize it. After that, he asked Stella to take off her clothes. Ikki, who saw this, wanted to help immediately but was held by Nagi because there were so many hostages. When Stella was about to take off her clothes, Ikki got very angry and wanted to leave immediately. Shizuku, who saw this, did not stay silent. She immediately released her Shoha Suiran power to create a space that could protect the hostages there. Meanwhile, from outside the room, the criminals tried to shoot at the room with their rifles. Just then, Nagi let Ikki go to attack. With his skills in the 7th secret technique called the Raiko technique, he immediately attacked the criminals. The technique could injure the criminals, but one of the criminals threatened Ikki to shoot one of the hostages. Suddenly there is a mysterious figure with transparent skills paralyze the threatening criminal. The figure turned out to be a man named Kirihara. He managed to save everyone there. After that incident, Kirihara became proud of himself in front of the women surrounding him. Ikki approached Kirihara to say thank you, but instead, he belittled him by saying helping the weak is his job. Stella did not accept the ridicule. Then Kirihara said that Ikki was just a coward who withdrew from the match for fear of facing him. Suddenly Ikki's cell phone rings. There is an incoming email for his match schedule from the school. It was written that he would be fighting Shizuku Kirihara. Kirihara was one of the school's chosen students who represented Hagun Academy at last year's 7-Star Festival. The next day the 7-Star Festival participant selection tournament was held. At that time, the first to compete was Stella against the student nicknamed Heavy Tank, Momotani. Long story short, Stella managed to win the fight easily. On the other hand, before the match started Ikki studied Kirihara's movement techniques. He knew Kirihara had transparent camouflage skills and was a ranged fighter, so he had to strategize to defeat him. In the afternoon, Ikki did jogging to train his physical strength. Then Nagi came over to him. Nagi asked him why he and Kirihara seemed to be fighting, and Ikki told him the story. Last year the main Kurogane family had connections with the then incumbent headmaster. In addition, Kirihara wanted Ikki to resign from the academy to embarrass the Kurogane family. He always invites Ikki to fight, but Ikki just stays silent and refuses to fight. But this time Ikki had to fight in the school's official tournament event, so he would train hard to beat him. The next day, before the match started, there was news that the fight between Ikki and Kirihara was a battle of life and death. The request came from Kirihara, and Ikki was initially silent but eventually accepted the challenge. When the time showed 30 minutes until the fight would start, Ikki looked nervous while remembering his dark past and was considered weak by everyone. Then it was time for the match. The two entered the arena and prepared to release their respective strengths. At the beginning of the fight, Ikki still survives against Kirihara's invisible space. Whereas if Ikki hallucinates in a forest, many arrows attack from various directions that cannot be seen. He managed to counter the arrow's attack with his sword, broke through the source of the arrow, and found Kirihara. But Kirihara immediately camouflaged again and released Million Rain at Ikki, hurting him and falling. Ikki, bleeding profusely, made Kirihara proud of himself and called him the worst one, so the other audience members cheered worst one on Ikki. Stella, who couldn't bear to hear it, immediately shouted and asked everyone to be quiet. It wasn't long before Ikki got up again. By now, he had understood Kirihara's movements and camouflage. Ikki's blade steel technique can now read Kirihara's movements and adds another skill so that his attacks can weaken Kirihara. As Ikki was about to kill Kirihara, he shouted that he admitted defeat and didn't want to get hurt. So in the end, Ikki won this fight. After the fight ended, Ikki was taken to the school clinic for treatment because his injuries were quite severe. Stella was seen accompanying Ikki beside him until she fell asleep. Seeing all of Stella's attitude towards Ikki that seemed sincere, Ikki finally said he loved her. Stella then said that she loved him too, and finally, they hugged and officially became lovers. After officially dating, the two of them were even more diligent in practicing to win the tournament. Even today, Ikki has managed to win 5 matches. On the other hand, Ikki, who always wins matches, makes the women in the academy admire him, and they even ask him to train them personally. After 2 weeks of dating, Stella felt that Ikki always made her jealous because he was surrounded by female students. Ikki's popularity made the other students at the academy envious, so they approached him while he was practicing. They took out their respective devices and wanted to attack Ikki, but Ikki easily defeated them all. After that, they apologized to Ikki and said they were envious of seeing his victory and being surrounded by academy students. Stella tries to be a good girlfriend by bringing 2 bottles of drink to Ikki, but Shizuku came and immediately gave the drink to Ikki first. Stella, who felt annoyed, ended up drinking the 2 bottles alone. Arriving at the dorm room, Stella trains to be a good girlfriend through dating games, but it turns out that Ikki still ignores her because he is busy teaching his academy friends. Then Stella confided to Kagami that she and Ikki had been dating for 2 weeks but had not kissed. Kagami finally helps their relationship to improve until the two of them kiss for the first time. Ikki and Stella were notified of the next match schedule in the afternoon. It says Ikki will fight Renrin Tomaru. Long story short, the next day, the game started. Ikki and Stella beat each of their opponents until they came out victorious. After the game was over, they went to the school field. There Ikki was visited by Shizuku, who offered him to be treated by her. As usual, Stella and Shizuku ended up arguing there. Soon Nagi came and told them that someone was following Ikki. That person had been following him for a week. Stella and Shizuku were terrified because they thought that person was a criminal. After Ikki approached the person behind the tree, it turned out that the person was a girl with a phobia of men. She was so embarrassed that she fell when Ikki approached her. As a result of the incident, she was treated at the school clinic. Then, the girl introduced herself. She is Ayase Ayatsuji. Ikki turns out to be familiar with the Ayatsuji clan and has a famous samurai named Kaito Ayatsuji. Kaito Ayatsuji, who is Ayase's father, is called the last samurai because he is a talented high-level swordsman even though he is not a blazer. He won several championships such as the Tenryu Gozen Tournament, Tazai Toitsu, Musashi Cup, and Juden Tournament. Ikki then asks how her father is, and she says that her father is being treated due to an accident in the last match. Then Shizuku asked what the reason was for following Ikki. She replied that she wanted to ask Ikki to teach her about sword techniques like her father, because according to her, the strength of Ikki and her father is equally strong even though they are both not a blazer. Ikki was happy to teach her. The next day, Ikki and Ayase began to practice swordsmanship. But when practicing, Ayase didn't look weak. Her movements are very agile and varied. It turned out that she didn't ask to be trained in basic movements, but she wanted to surpass her father's strength and hone her skills to level up. Ikki commented that her movements were not as fast as her father's even though she had imitated her father's movements. He asked her not to imitate anyone to develop her skills, and she had to be herself because her physique and her father's were also different. According to Ikki, what was wrong with Ayase was the position of the feet when doing the stance. Then Ikki grabbed Ayase's thighs to fix her legs. However, Stella, Shizuku, and Ayase blushed in embarrassment seeing Ikki do that. But Ikki's opinion was right. With a new foot position, it could make her movements faster. After the afternoon practice was over, Ayase thanked Ikki. Arriving at the dorm room, Stella still seems jealous of Ikki who is always close to other women. But Ikki held Stella's hand and promised he would be faithful and professional in training the women. The next day Stella, Ikki and Ayase agreed to eat at a cafe. Suddenly came a group of men and women who called and approached Ayase. The man named Kuraudo Kurashiki, a Danro Academy's hero student. His nickname is Sword Eater. When Ikki said don't bother Ayase, Kuraudo suddenly hit his head with a glass bottle. At that time, Kuraudo underestimated Ikki to spitting in his face, but he kept quiet and smiled. Stella, who had not accepted Kuraudo's treatment earlier, tried to resist but was held back by Ikki. Then they left. Then Stella asked why Ikki was silent. He explained that if he fought them, he would be expelled from the academy because he would be using the device in a public place. Ayase said that Kuraudo was a very strong person. Suddenly there are two women named Kanata Todokubara and Hagun. She said Ikki's decision not to fight back was right. Then they all went home. While on his way home, Ikki received an email about the match schedule. It was written that Ikki's 7th match would be against Ayase Ayatsuji. The next day Nagi asks Ikki about his fight against Ayase, because if she loses, then their friendship could be destroyed. But Ikki told Nagi he would fight like a knight against his enemy. He is worried about Ayase's mentality because she has to fight him, her own teacher. Ikki said that Ayase sent a message to him to meet before the match, but Nagi said it could be a trap from her because her existence is somewhat mysterious in this school. That night Ikki still came to meet Ayase on the top of a building. Ayase is wearing her samurai outfit and says she can't compete against him. Surprisingly, Ayase jumped off the building to end her life, so Ikki won the match. Ikki, who didn't want to lose his friend, released the Ito Shura technique to increase his speed and save Ayase. He managed to save her but his body became weak because he had to spend a lot of energy. It turned out that Ayase did this on purpose to get Ikki out of his ace. She knew that Ito Shura could only be taken out once a day, so in tomorrow's match, he couldn't use that power so she could win. Ikki returned to his room limp and dropped his body on top of Stella. The next day Ikki met the principal to inquire about Ayase. The principal said that 2 years ago, Ayase was a swordsman. Her personality became mysterious after her father fell into a coma after he lost against a strong figure named Kuraudo who became a finalist for the 7-Star Festival. That's why Ayase aims to win the match so she can compete with Kuraudo in the final. Soon the match was about to start, and Ikki and Ayase entered the arena. After the match started, Ikki immediately attacked Ayase but suddenly, he received an invisible sword attack. It was Ayase's technique which was a wind sword technique. As they continued to fight, Ikki noticed something odd, as if he saw that there were a lot of sword swings there. Ikki finally realized that Ayase purposely used her wind blades in all directions to tear her opponent apart. If Ikki reports, he might win because what Ayase did was cheating. Ikki had received information from Yuri-chan that Ayase had cheated, but he still wanted to continue the match. Even though Ikki was seriously injured, he didn't give up and continued to attack Ayase, making her mind down a bit and she couldn't bear to attack Ikki. That was Ikki's technique to weaken Ayase's chaotic mental state. After striking with the fourth sword technique, Ikki defeated Ayase without injuring her. Finally, they both shook hands. The next day, Ikki and Ayase came to a house in the middle of the forest. He made a plan to help restore the good name of the Ayatsuji family and fight Kuraudo, where Kuraudo always challenges all colleges to compete against him. When Kaito fought Kuraudo, his strength was balanced, but when Kaito wanted to release his secret move, he suddenly fell down after being attacked by Kuraudo. After that, Ikki opened the door of the house and challenged Kuraudo. After he saw Ikki, Kuraudo immediately looked down on him. Ikki said that yesterday he was silent because of the academy's rules, but now he is challenging him to reclaim the place while showing the college he has conquered. The fight began. Kuraudo released Orochimaru's sword, which looked like a vicious snake. At the start of the battle, Ikki held out to see his enemy's movements and techniques. There he realized that Kuraudo's movement was a super fast snake movement and his sword could change into two forms. What made Kaito lose at that time was Kuraudo's reflex movement, which could increase his strength by 3 times to attack from different sides. After Ikki observed Kuraudo's movements, he started to seriously attack Kuraudo. Then Kuraudo let out a two-way move simultaneously, but Ikki looked happy because that was his weakness. The faster he attacks, the faster he runs out of energy. Then Ikki took out Ayatsuji's sword move called Tenmu. Ayase was surprised how Ikki knew her father's last move. Stella explained it was because Blade Steel stole the enemy's moves while Ayase and Ikki were practicing. Finally, Kuraudo was defeated. He left the house saying he'll see them in the final of the 7-Star Festival. On the other hand, Shizuku was home and was at her house, so that the whereabouts of Ikki's father can be seen. He is named Ikki Kurogane. Her father was happy because Shizuku was able to win 12 matches in the academy's selection. Then Shizuku told her father that Ikki had also won 12 matches, but her father didn't seem to care about hearing about Ikki. Elsewhere, Stella and Ikki got the special right to vacation in the Academy's mountainous region because they were representatives of the rapidly growing first class in Hagun Academy. But it turned out that they weren't really on vacation there because they were asked to help clean the outdoor and indoor areas of the battle arena. Then Stella and Ikki got the task of clearing the mountaintop area. The two of them walked far enough to make Stella exhausted. Arriving at the peak, they were attacked by a group of rock monsters. Ikki attacked with secret sword move 1, Saigeki. He managed to destroy one of the stone monsters, but the monster's body was able to reassemble. Ikki looked overwhelmed with them while Stella, sick, couldn't help him. Fortunately, it wasn't long before another student came to help him. There they knew the rock monster looked like a controlled puppet. There must be a blazer behind the monsters. There was also a woman named Toka who was the class president. She could counter the monster's controller with a powerful lightning sword technique called Reikiri. Then a mysterious figure appeared who was targeting Ikki and Stella but was vague. The next day they returned to the academy. Ikki tells Nagi about Toka Todo's greatness when she fights her enemy with Reikiri's melee sword attack. Nagi said that Shizuku will have a match against Toka tomorrow in the arena. Long story short, the next day, the fight began. With the determination to make her brother happy, Shizuku is eager to compete to win. She is a blazer that uses water magic and sword elements. The match started from a distance that looked like they were evenly matched. She could withstand Toka's attack even with her magic power. But when doing close combat, Toka managed to use a move like Blink so she could spin quickly until Shizuku was off guard and attacked her. Shizuku counterattacked using mist magic, so a mechanical sword fight ensued. Until finally, Toka's Reikiri sword technique succeeded in overthrowing Shizuku. The match was won by Toka Todo. Shizuku's defeat was heard by her father, so he planned an evil plan with the mysterious person controlling the stone monster yesterday. On the other hand, Stella managed to win 14 matches because Stella and Ikki both promised to be the 6 winning students representing Hagun Academy at the festival. Then the two of them kissed without knowing there was a figure taking pictures of the incident. Then Ikki was called by the principal to her room. She asked if Ikki knew the cunning old man named Akaza from the International Federation of Magic Knights. Ikki replied that he had met him several times while still living at his parents' house. Akaza is a member of the Kurogane branch of the family and according to Ikki, he currently works for his father. It seems that now he is in charge of the ethics committee in the Japanese Federation branch and secretly spying on Hagun Academy. The principal congratulates because now 3 big names will participate in the 7-Star Festival, namely Ikki, Stella, and Toka Todo. After that they went back to the student management room. Arriving there, Toka scolded other students for making the room messy. When members of the student organization make a visit to an orphanage, they invite Ikki and Stella to come along. But when they returned to the dormitory, there was news in the newspaper entitled Princess Stella's Forbidden Scandal. It was written that Ikki, who was a rank F student, had tarnished a royal princess from rank A. Of course, Stella didn't accept it because this was hoax news. It turned out that the news was the work of Ayase, the person who hated Ikki. For this reason, Ayase, on behalf of the Ethics Federation, will conduct an investigation into Ikki over the next few days. Ayase deliberately finds fault with Ikki, so he can't participate in the selection. They went to the ethics courtroom. Ikki is interrogated about his abuse case against a royal princess from abroad. Ikki knew for sure that this had something to do with his father because Ayase was the head of the Magic Federation in Japan. He then asked Ayase to meet his father. Then his father appeared from the screen and said he is a weak person and does not have any talent because empty power will produce empty things too. Ikki was asked to be self-aware and not to do anything, because it will make other weak people arrogant. But for Ikki, all of his father's words motivated him. He realized that his father said that because he was born without any magical talent and brought shame to the Kurogane family, so only Ikki himself was able to make him rise and become a winner. At the final trial, Ikki is given a chance to think because his next opponent is Toka, the former 7-star festival semi-finalist and number 1 in the class. Ayase gives Ikki a challenge. If he can win against Toka, they will stop looking down on him, but if he loses, he must want to withdraw from Hagun Academy. The next day the selection round began, where there were only 6 people who would represent the selection. Long story short, Nagi managed to pass the selection. Next was the fight between Ikki and Toka, but they were confused because Ikki never came. It turned out that Ayase told Ikki to walk from the Federation building to the academy, but because of the torment, Ikki became stronger as he recalled his past. Weak doesn't mean losing. It was Ikki's weakness that motivated him to be strong. Then Ikki arrived at the academy and was immediately greeted by Shizuku. They all seemed to support him. Then they gathered in the battle arena, and they both released each other's strengths, Ikki with Ito Shura while Toka with Reikiri. As the two attacked each other, a clash of energies ensued. Long story short, finally Ikki was able to defeat Toka. For Ikki's victory, Ayase did not accept it, and he wanted to attack Ikki in the battle arena with his device. But Stella came and saved Ikki from Ayase's attack. Then, Ikki proposed to Stella in front of everyone and asked her to be his bride. Stella was shocked and confused, but she replied that she was willing to be Ikki's bride. Kagami, who witnessed the proposal process, shouted why they did it in the middle of the live TV broadcast. And finally, Ikki and Stella kissed. Stella's father called Ikki's father and asked him not to interfere in the children's affairs with their business matters. The moral that can be learned is to make your weakness a motivation to be strong, because not always the weak will lose, and not always the strong will win.